The other thing could be because vampires don't have a blood system, they physically can't blush. So since he's half and half, maybe he was just curious.
No, yeah, we understood what you're trying to say in the beginning. You're just wrong.
Oh.
I finally
Watched.
I finally
Watched. I
finally
watched. I
finally
watched.
I finally
Watched.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of I Finally Watched. I'm Milan.
And this is David. And today we finally watched Blade 2.
We did finally watch Blade 2. We did Blade 1 a few months ago. A year ago? Something like that. It's been a while.
It might even be 2 or 3 years at this point, a few months ago.
Well, a year is a few months ago, depending on how you break it down. And we did it solo. But what I know was a few months ago, at the beginning of this year, is we had a special guest for Hellboy, Mr. Matthew Dawson. Hi, Matthew.
Hey guys, thanks for having me back. It's always a pleasure to be on the I Finally Watched podcast, the greatest podcast to ever guest on, and it's good to be here to talk about Blade 2, a movie that I finally watched as well. Had none of us seen this?
So I saw Blade when it came out, or around that time. I had the DVD, and I saw Blade Trinity, and I think I was always thrown off by like the weird looking vampire alien things in Blade 2. They're just like, that's not what I want from a Blade movie. And Blade Trinity has none of that in it. It's like it's just like a back to basics type thing from what I remember.
I do want to clarify very quickly on exactly why we have Matthew for Blade 2, since we didn't have him for Blade 1, but we did have him for Hellboy, is that the similarity between Hellboy and Blade 2 is that they share a director, Mr. Guillermo del Toro.
I don't know why I've become the Guillermo del Toro guy of the I Finally Watched podcast.
That's because that's the way Alon's brain works. That's why that's happened.
I'm happy to take up the role because Guillermo's great.
I think we actually brought this up in the Hellboy episode though, because we were looking up what else he had done. Because before Hellboy, like I think we were trying to figure out if that was like his big break, and obviously he's done other things. But this came out, I think, 2 years before Hellboy. And it's kind of funny that there's like a lot of, Ron Perlman. There's a lot of like the look and feel of it is very similar to Hellboy. So it is interesting seeing his kind of twist on it. Cause like look and feel wise, it's a completely different movie from the first one to me.
Yeah. I mean, I think I kind of was watching it and I described it in my mind kind of like it's a Blade movie second and a Guillermo del Toro movie first, where you see a lot of the tropes that Guillermo put in his other films, but then it feels like the tropes of a Blade movie are stuck in there at certain places. I think the best representation of that is towards the end where Whistler throws Blade his glasses and he catches them and he puts them on. I'm like, that's a Blade move, but you have to have that in a Blade movie. And Guillermo del Toro probably wouldn't have put that in there if it wasn't Blade. That's kind of like the strongest thing that I saw. I do want to also mention, Matthew, you said that this is not only your first time watching Blade 2, but you watched Blade 1 in preparation for Blade 2.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys do like a greatest guest award on this show or anything, but I think I definitely deserve the nomination, the award, whatever, for this year because, first of all, I brought the Hellboy episode, which was great, and it was fun. I re-listened to it the other day, and I just died laughing again at Alon going like, I was a hell boy, now I'm a hell man. And then just like yeah, I hadn't seen Blade 1, so when you guys asked me to come back on again, I was like, all right, we'll do Blade. And you guys were like, well, we've already done Blade. It's like, what, we can do Blade 2? And I was like, I haven't seen Blade 1. I can't just watch Blade 2. I gotta know what happens in Blade 1, which I'm so glad I did. Because if I hadn't watched Blade 1, this movie would have made sense. Because this movie counteracts a lot of Blade 1, which I was not ready for. I'm very mixed on this franchise as it's going. I have not watched Trinity yet. And I hear it's not good. So
Well, it wasn't directed by Guillermo del Toro, so we probably won't have you on for that episode.
okay, yeah, I get it.
The funny thing is that I watched it with my wife and sister-in-laws, and they also never watched the first Blade. So they kept bugging me. They were like, "Do we have to watch the first Blade to understand Blade 2?" And I was like, "I don't think you do," and you really don't, because a lot of the portion of Blade 2 is flashbacks to like explaining Blade 1, especially about all the thing that happened to Whistler back then, except for the fact of the suicide.
Makes no sense.
Because you assume that he offed himself in the end, but really I guess he just fired the gun as Blade was walking away to fake his death.
What a pussy. He was like, I don't want to do it.
No explanation too about they show the flashback of him killing himself, but no explanation about why it didn't take.
Yeah. I was waiting for that flashback to keep going and like sort of reveal what happened, and then it doesn't do that.
It just shows exactly the same clip as it showed in Blade 1.
I kept waiting for it to cut to Whistler and have it like the gunshot goes, but a vampire's holding his hand and like pulled it away and they take him or something.
That would have been like, good.
That would have been cool, but it doesn't happen. And so it's like, oh, I know it's confusing that Whistler died in the first one. That's it. Like no explanation, no but it's just very strange start to this movie.
And it's weird too. So the same writer wrote Blade 2, and Blade Trinity. David S. Goyer, who also wrote Batman Begins, The Dark Knight.
Yeah. David S. Goyer is a very famous comic book movie adaptation writer.
So my point is, I don't know what happened. If he was able to write this the way he wanted, and there's some funny, like, I don't think it's purposely Guillermo del Toro passing the buck, but he's like, I had nothing to do with writing this, just to let you guys know. And to me, the weakest part of this movie is the writing. Like, even if you leave out like the whole retconning Whistler's death, because you're like, oh, Chris Christopherson's going to come back. It feels like they never planned on sequels for this. And then when they're like, oh, let's do a sequel, they're like, well, fuck, we got to bring him back. And they could have. They just decided not to explain it.
So they didn't have to bring him back. That's the thing, is that the movie would have been okay without him. And I think the reason...
even get like Norman Reedus's character filling in that role. And then they bring Whistler back and there's like two of them.
So I think the point of Whistler is the betrayal of Norman Reedus's character. And then it's like, oh, then who does he have? Oh, don't worry, guys. He has Whistler still. But I think what would have been a much cooler, darker ending is that he has no one in the end. And it's just him. And then do whatever you want with Trinity. But like, it would have been way more impactful because he was making a love connection to that female vampire. He had Scud. He had Whistler. How cool would it have been at the end of it? He lost everyone. I think that would have been a much more powerful ending than like, oh yeah, I have my ragtime team behind me always.
Yeah.
I think killing off a few more characters wouldn't have saved this. One of the issues with the movie to me is that everything is so telegraphed. So like even from the start, and we can start, but like we're in this Prague blood bank. You see this really fucking weird dude who's going in, and they're like, "Do you have any tattoos, any piercings?" And then they like strap him in. They're like, "Oh, we're gonna drain you." And then he's crying, and you're like, "Oh, this is immediately gonna turn to laughter, and he's gonna fucking kill them all." And it's like it's just that level of obvious for everything. So like in the middle of the movie when the head vampire Damaskinos. Come up with a shorter name for that guy, first of all. That would be helpful
His
to
name
me.
is Dom, okay?
Anyway, when he's like, I have someone on the inside, I wrote immediately, I was like, they want us to think it's Whistler. It's very clearly Scud. Like, it's just so obvious. Like, and I mean, it's the movie's 20 years old. So it's like I think a lot of older movies become obvious, later on. But just like
Hmm.
every single move it was going to make, I was like, this is just so fucking obvious. Like, what's going to happen here?
I actually missed the line where he said, I have someone on the inside. Or I heard it and I was like, oh, maybe to me it was so obviously Whistler that I was like, oh, but that doesn't matter, I guess. I brushed it off so fast in my mind that it didn't occur to me that. So when Norman Reedus was like a thing, I was just like, oh, that's a cool twist. But I guess if I was paying more attention.
Mhm.
The other thing about Whistler, since it's such a huge plot point, not just in the beginning of the movie, but the entire movie, is that they do these things where, like Matthew says, completely retcons everything. And one of those, the thing that I had the biggest problem with, but the fact that no one in the movie had a problem with it, except maybe it was mentioned once, I was like, maybe I shouldn't have a problem with this, is the thing he gives him to be like to curb his thirst for blood for the rest of the movie. And I was just
Yeah.
like, oh, that's an OP thing. That's like, I don't know the point of that. That takes care of all your problem. Why don't you just give that to all the vampires and they're okay,
Yeah, I didn't even think about that because the serum is such like a huge thing in the first movie. Like
Yeah.
every 5 minutes they're like, he's got to have a serum guy, and then this one they're just kind of like, nah, he doesn't really need it. He just get one shot and he's good the rest of the movie.
Well, I thought, and I can't remember one that well right now because like the point of one is not the plot for sure. I mean, there's the major plot point, but wasn't she trying to design something to get him to where he didn't need the woman that he saves? She was like trying
Yeah.
to design something to where he would never need blood again. And I thought it was like a one-time deal, but I guess he has to keep taking the serum to like, I don't know, keep that up. I don't like the whole like the fact that the thing worked on Whistler. I was like, I mean, when they brought him back, he's just going to be back in the movie. So it's like after that, I was just like, all right, well, whatever. As far as like what keeps him, able to act like a human.
The other thing about him is when he goes on the roof to act as a sniper, and then Scuzz is being absolutely surrounded by vampire parasite things that
The
are just
Reapers.
the Reapers. It's funny too because if anyone here has watched The Walking Dead, we know that this isn't the first time Norman Reedus has gone against a group called the Reapers.
Yeah.
Totally typecast is what I'm beginning to think Norman Reedus is. But yeah, Whistler goes away for a while. It's like, I need help, and he's just nowhere to be seen. It's one of those things that I hate in movies where you do something with a character to throw suspicion on that character, but it's so obvious, like there's no reason to be suspicious of that character.
Mhm.
Well, no, I think I would say it a different way because I had the same problem. But you have the character do something that's very suspicious with no reasonable like alternative for why he was doing it. Right? There's like no reason Whistler left his post to follow
Right.
this random Reaper, unless he just. I mean, you could say he just doesn't like Scud, so he doesn't give a shit if Scud dies. Um,
Which he
I,
was right.
I
He was
will say the
correct.
thing that felt like undercooked was the whole Blade knew Scud was bad the whole time.
Mm.
Although I did read some stuff that I maybe would have caught on second watch where Blade tells Whistler like keep your friends close and your enemies closer, and I guess Scud is like right behind him.
Mm.
They turn to him like
Yeah.
this, like
because at the end Blade's like, yeah, I knew that they turned you, but I was like, it's a cool little scene, and we can talk about it more when it happened. But I wanted more in depth of like when they turned and what happened because it kind of doesn't explain like when he found him, was he good? Because like Blade did save his
no,
life.
I. That's true too, but he's like, I'm a familiar of the Dom guy, so he's going to do whatever the Dom guy wants him to do.
But Blade
He's
did
this
save his life. He has real wounds on his chest from where he was getting attacked. So if he was
with
a
a.
familiar, if
By
he's
the
a
way,
familiar of the biggest, baddest vampire in the world, they probably wouldn't have attacked him.
I guess that's true. But by the way that Blade saved him in the situation that he was in is exactly the kind of situation that in a vampire world I like to also die in. Okay, so
I don't think they actually fuck you while they're eating your neck a lot.
but
I don't
they
know. I watched that first Blade movie. There was
see, yeah,
I don't know what was going on in that final scene, but something was going. And I'm very glad because I listened to the Blade episode you guys did right before this as well, and I'm very glad you guys were also creeped out by that mom and Blade scene.
Yeah,
Very strange.
It's a little,
Very
little
strange.
odd.
In this
I will-
movie, in an opposite fashion, not nearly horny enough. That's my notes.
Well, there's supposed to be. I read there's supposed to be a sex scene between Blade and Nissa, which I think would have made sense because like they do well enough in establishing that they like each other, but it feels like this is a 2-hour movie that feels like a 90-minute movie
yeah.
because of how long all the action scenes are.
Mhm.
And I don't know. Like I said earlier, Guillermo del Toro was like, I didn't want to interject on the script at all. I wanted to, take their vision. I mean, there's some stuff he should have interjected on, I feel like.
Yeah, I didn't feel their chemistry at all in this. I kept thinking, like, are they trying to make this a romance? Like, what is going
Yeah,
on
they,
here?
needed, they needed more.
I felt
Yeah.
the attempt. And I kind of bought it, but I think you're right. You need that extra scene to kind of push it into like, okay, that's what they're definitely doing. Speaking of feeling too coordinated, is especially the beginning. All the fight scenes seemed way too choreographed. Like, oh, I'm gonna put my sword up here and you're gonna put your sword down here, and then I'm gonna meet you down here, and then I'm gonna flip you 5 times. And I just felt like maybe it was the wire work or the way they, I don't know, but it just felt too mechanical and it didn't feel like an organic fight scene.
It felt like, and this is a lot of older movies with fighting in it, it felt very much like one after another attacks you.
Oh yeah, like that trope. Yeah,
So-
well, except for Scud, where he had like 5
He didn't fight any of them off.
Reapers come at him.
So Donnie Yen, who plays Snowman, was one of the fight choreographers, and I feel like it's hard to not have the one after the other when you have Wesley Snipes in here. Like, I'm gonna be the badass, so I need to kill 10 or 20 guys. They have to attack you one after the, especially when he's killing them with his bare hands. Like, he doesn't even have his sword because Reinhardt has his sword. So like, there's not really a way to work around that. I think we should start. We've already talked about the first blood bank scene. I do like the way these movies are couched with like sort of a beginning and ending scene like that. I always like enjoy that part. So like this one leading into the movie, and then the way it ties into the end when he gets the guy at the end in the like the fucking spank bank room with the like he in London.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I enjoy
I
those.
think I forgot about you.
So he is on this. We get this recapped after that first scene where he's like, I'm looking for Whistler. I've been looking for him for 2 years, and we join the story right when he finds him. Basically, I thought it was funny. He's like beating the shit out of these guys, and they all jump out of this window and slide down the stairs to get on their motorcycles. And there's 3 motorcycles. So the first guy gets on his motorcycle, and then the second guy starts chasing after the first guy on his motorcycle, like, don't leave me. And it's like, just get on the motorcycle. And then the third guy does the exact same thing. And it's like, there's a third motorcycle. What are you doing? Like,
I
weird.
like how the only exit out of that alley is blocked by Blade's car, and so they all have to turn around. But then Blade gets like next to his car somehow. I think he's chasing them, right? And he like, doesn't he kiss his car, or he's like good girl or something like that.
He does the kissing like that to
Like
it.
that, yeah. And I was and the car, you think that establishes that would be so cool too. Everyone's dead and all Blade has is the car, right? And he like treats it like an extension of himself. But then that's the only scene we really get that with that car. nothing else. Like that car never comes up, and that could have been really. It's like the car that Scud has been working on, or whatever. But like, how cool would have been for it to have been like all pimped out with like stake throwers and like machine guns coming out of the hood. Nothing.
Yeah.
Why are you trying to rewrite this bad movie?
Oh, what about like all the other vampires who have no problems just jumping down, but that one guy who like burns his hands coming down the fire escape?
Scared of heights.
I was wondering about that too. I'm like, did Blade do something to the fire escape? Why is this one guy having problems with it? But I don't know. Apparently
Matthew, you
for
don't
him-
know the rules of vampire killing. It's garlic, stakes to the heart, and
Uh-huh.
fire escapes burning your hand if you come down them. too
That's
fast.
it.
Might
I
be
did
made of
forget
silver.
about that one.
It's a very,
Fire escapes
very
are made of
high class.
silver.
Oh, that'd
It's a
be
very
cool.
high class one. The ladder was made of
Yeah.
silver. So he finds Whistler, and instead of killing him, decides he's going to take him home. And as you said, he already saves him. So the vampires break in, right? And at first you're like, oh, this is supposed to, they break in right after Whistler. So they followed Whistler. But like, I'd say a little bit into the movie, right when the main vampire's like, I have someone on the inside, I was like, oh, it's Scud. And I was like, oh, and that's how the vampires found Blade. And then at the end, Scud's like, do you think I let them in? Or you think they broke into my systems? No, I let them in.
Yeah, the other part of like kind of knowing a suspicion on Norman Reedus is he's literally like the snake in the garden. He's behind Blade and he's whispering to him and he's like, you should just kill Whistler. Like there's no point of having him around. You should just kill him. And it's like, what a weird stance to take on a guy you don't know.
Yeah, well, I think he said that he's like, he talks about him all the time and he knows he's like hung up on it. And it's also, it's totally against Blade's like ethic and ethos to like save a vampire, right?
Yeah.
Like the only other time he does it is Nyssa, which is kind of, that's the scene where you're like, oh, he's sort of in love with her, when he, instead of killing her, he lets her eat him so that she can live. So the other funny thing too, another like telegraph moment, those vampires break in, they're fighting Blade. I was like, oh, they're not even trying to kill anybody right here. And it's like, oh, so they're like, this is they're about to make an offer to him, or like, these are not the bad guys. Right. And so that's kind of where it takes off. He goes to the main vampire castle. And this is what I want to talk about. Yeah. The geography of this movie makes no sense to me. So Nomak is killing people at a Prague blood bank. And then he's back in, is this LA? I thought it was LA in the first movie. I have no idea where we are.
No idea.
But Nomak brought himself and every one of these Reapers to LA, New York, wherever we're supposed to be right now. Like, why is this centrally located right all in the same city?
That's the thing about Blade in general that confuses me a lot. I'm not really into Blade comics, but it's just the fact that
This movie isn't going to get you
Marvel. There. Yeah. You think about Blade being in Marvel. I have the same problem with like X-Men: The Mutants. Vampires should be brought up a lot. Like every weekend, Spider-Man should be fighting a vampire. If these guys are like controlling everything, as these movies like to say.
Well, like in the first three phases of the MCU, you had little hints of like things happening elsewhere in the world, where like Black Widow will pop up onto a screen and she's like, there's trouble in Africa off the coast, and you're like, oh, that's Wakanda. Like they're mentioning it. It's like tremors in the Atlantic Ocean. Oh, that's where Namor lives. Like they put little bits of things in here. But if like you said, if you're gonna go and you're gonna be like, oh, vampires exist wildly known in this world, then why is Tony Stark not like, oh, that's my vampire defense system? You know, any of those motherfuckers come around, I got them. But
my
none of that.
Powered suit.
My solar powered suit. Exactly. But we have none of that. So it is kind of weird. And also, like all DC Marvel movies that have come before the MCU, everything is very separated in its own world. And so Blade not having, and I think that's the thing with this movie too, is that it feels alone in the grand scheme of things. You have no cops or detective side story in this that is like investigating all these deaths. You're like, well, I guess no one gives a shit except Blade in this world, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a movie that almost feels ashamed to be a Marvel property because it came out 2002, same year as the original Spider-Man movie, and no Marvel logo on it. I thought, like, I don't know if this came out like a couple months before or after Spider-Man, but I feel like it'd be such a smart marketing scheme to be like, yeah, we're Marvel too. Like Spider-Man was the biggest box office weekend ever at the time. Like when they want to cash in on that, but then you don't really see it until the credits where it's just like, based off Marvel comics, whatever.
Well, also, what year did Daredevil, Ben Affleck's Daredevil, come into play? Because it was right around this time too, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What
I
year
think
was it?
wasn't Marvel selling. Marvel was probably selling the rights to make these, right? So some other studio was making it at the time. So it's like,
Yeah.
Oh,
it's
for Blade?
whatever deal they made.
Definitely.
So I did hear that David S. Goyer, when he originally wrote this, wanted the main bad guy to be Morbius, but they
Yeah,
wanted
that
to
would be
make
dope.
they wanted to make a standalone, which we all know how that turned out.
I don't know what you're talking about, David. I mean, it's the two most, famous MCU villains. Deacon Frost, everyone knows him, and
Everyone.
and a Reaper guy. Come on.
Reaper.
That's your new go-to joke. You've done it twice so far. Is I don't know what you're talking about, and then say a thing that's like the opposite of reality.
It's called comedy. You should look it up.
It's the one comedy. It's just that joke. One of my favorite jokes in this movie, though, is Carol Roden, who plays the main bad guy in Hellboy. He comes in. He's like, "Oh, you must be you're not a vampire. You're a human." He's like, "Close. I'm a lawyer."
Oh, that was great.
That was also my favorite joke.
His name in this is Coonan, which, by the way, following people's names in this movie is like fucking pointless to me. Like I had to look it up afterwards, but he apparently, most of his lines were dubbed because people found his accent too hard to follow. And I was like, I've heard him in so many movies. Like it's not hard to understand him at all. I don't know if maybe he got better like in Hellboy and then other movies I've seen since then, but it was like such an obvious dubbing on his lines, like in certain parts of the movie.
I think the only reason I remember Scud's name is because Whistler called him like Scat or something.
Yeah.
Like,
I don't think he called him Scat.
well, what did he call him then?
Scuzz.
Oh, whatever. Okay, so, and then he's like, no, man, it's not Scuzz. It's Scud with a D. And I was like, well, now you always are never going to forget that name.
So this is where they come together and they're like, hey, we need your help to kill this vampire that kills vampires. And he's like, why would I do that? It's like, oh, because he's eventually going to kill humans, which I guess turns out to not be true. Like Blade's motivation in killing him in the end, I was like, it only must be because he is in love with Nyssa. Like otherwise it's like, or maybe he's just like, I just got to kill him. Like he could go super villain on us. But like Blade joining this and Whistler's like, what the fuck are you doing? He's like, oh, we got to do it. We're going to do it for now. Like we gotta have this happen. And I do love when they're on the helicopter and she's like, oh, I just thought it would have been harder to convince him to come. And then he just shows that he's got like a shit ton of fucking explosives, like to kill everybody in the nearby area if they if they're going to try and kill him.
The way that the equipment is sprawled out, like, okay, two really cool parts about this movie is when we're introduced to the vampire team that was training to kill Blade, and then one of them being Ron Perlman. I was like, fuck yeah, that's awesome. But the whole interaction, all the other characters are pretty like just one-offs or whatever, but the interaction between Ron Perlman and Blade and Wesley Snipes is gold. Like, the only part that I felt like was actually well written was anything that came out of their mouths to each other. But especially when he sticks the thing on the back of Ron Perlman's head and he's like, that's a bomb rigged to explode if you fucking look at me, lopsided. And he's like, yeah.
Sorry, when Ron Perlman showed up, my little Hellboy loving heart was so happy. And I was just like, oh my gosh, it's him. Like, I was just so excited. And the first line out of his mouth, me and the guys were wondering, can you blush? I'm like, is that racist, Ron Perlman? Is this gonna be you? Let's not do this.
Ron Perlman just wrote his own lines for this movie.
It's just like,
Well, apparently,
no, they made my boy race. I was so pissed.
apparently
think-
he is supposed to be a Nazi, like a neo-Nazi.
I figured.
Um,
But that line doesn't make sense. Why would he be racist? One of his vampire dudes is black. One of the guys in his crew is black. Why is he racist?
okay, I didn't take it as a racist thing.
It is.
I never do because I'm
It is.
but no, I took it as because vampires don't have any blood circulating through their system, so they can't blush. But then
It's
because-
like 100% a racist thing. Snipes apparently had someone say that to him in real life, and he added it in the movie.
But can you look at it at my point of view?
Listen, quit white-splaining the fucking thing. I just told you what it is. Back off.
But it could have been taken both ways. Sure, it could be a racist thing. Okay, whatever. But I'm not racist, so I don't know. And but the other
Maybe
thing,
Reinhardt keeps the black vampire around so he can be the like, oh, I have a black friend. It's
Yeah,
okay.
right.
I
It's
can
like, I
say
have black
this.
vampire friends. Like it's
I have a black
no, like guys, you understand?
He's cool when I say it. Like,
no, but the other thing could be because vampires don't have a blood system, they physically can't blush. So since he's half and half, maybe he was just curious.
No, yeah, we understood what you're trying to say in the beginning. You're just wrong.
Oh, okay.
yeah, I just think he's racist. I don't. And then also like after that, what's Blake call? He calls him like Adolf. I'm like, okay, that was kind of the cherry on top.
Yeah, I think.
Well, see, the other way that could have been taken is, that's just a common name, and
his name's
Hitler was a vampire.
Reinhardt. He knows he's German. Yeah, I get it. So let's go to the first club scene, which this is when they're going to the club. I'm like, how the fuck do they know this is where to go?
yeah.
And it's in this same town. This dude was in
Very
Prague.
lucky
How did he
guess.
make it over here? Like, there's no any explanation whatsoever of how they know where to go would
It's
have
a-
been helpful.
It's a huge plot device, like convenience trap, because they're like, well, if he was going to go anywhere, where would he go? And they're like, well, there's this nightclub that's full of vampires, would be a great feeding ground for him. But I am sure
There's
that there
tons.
are tons. Exactly.
In Blade 1, we learned there are tons of places like that worldwide. It's like a network. So yeah, it doesn't make any sense that the only reason it does, and I don't want to give the writer too much credit for this, although like he's written other stuff that's good, is that the main guy with Nomak is eventually coming back to get to his father. So the fact that he would end up in the same city as his father makes sense because that's what he wants.
Yeah.
So like the fact that he keeps getting caught, because the other thing is they get caught in the sewer system. I'm sure there's a lot of sewers in this town, so that they just end up finding the right one right away. I mean, even with the pheromones, what are these, like sharks? They smell the pheromones like that far away. So I don't know. It is, like you said, it's a lot of plot convenience. I think the action in this first club scene is good. It's really just to establish like how powerful these vampires are. And one thing it points out too is like the fact that this probably isn't evolution. It's more of like they've been like scientifically bred to like be able to withstand garlic and silver and,
Well,
be
first-
like super strong.
First, isn't it like they determine there's some sort of parasite enhancement living in them?
Well, that's what I think that might be what they said in the beginning, but it's like
It's
at
like
the
a
end
disease.
you find out. Yeah, at the end you find out it's like bred. They're bred that way.
I understand that. I thought the parasite was the added factor into the breeding, but maybe I was wrong in looking
I don't
into
know.
that.
I don't remember that.
I'm not a
My
vampire
problem with
scientist.
Yeah. My problem with this club scene is in the first Blade, when Blade steps into the club, everything like stops and all the vampires look at him and they're like, holy shit, it's Blade. This time he's just walking around. People do not care that this is Blade. He's supposed to be this like world-renowned scary vampire killer, and he's just mucking about here. This time they don't care.
So not only is that a huge problem, Matthew, in this movie, the other problem is that now there's a hierarchy in vampires where you're a pureblood or like a turn,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so the purebloods, as it was explained to me, is when a vampire mommy and a daddy love each other very much,
Oh, what did they do?
they have a baby vampire, and that's apparently a
Oh.
pureblood. And it doesn't matter if the mommy or daddy vampire were turned. If they were turned or if they were pureblood, the baby, it doesn't matter. The baby's pureblood, which is a weird thing, right? Because if they view turn vampires as a lower class of vampires, then that baby would immediately be like a higher class of vampire than its parents.
I like how you're explaining that the vampires, the pureblood vampires, aren't bigoted enough to the other vampires. That there needs to be more racism amongst the vampires. It's like you counting these as pureblood? This fucking mudblood over here, you're saying is pure? Get out of here.
It doesn't even help that half of them are Nazis.
By
So
the way, I think one of the explanations for why they may not recognize Blade is because the one guy Priest says we should just kill all these fucking people. They're all turned anyway. They may not know who Blade is because they're all kind of new, fresher vampires, right? Whereas like purebloods are going to know who he is.
that's what I'm
because they've
saying.
been dealing with him for forever.
That was my thought about it too. But also, it's such a weird scenario because they're like, hey, and they tell Blade this. They like, when you go in here, you're gonna see all sorts of nasty ass shit. And we do. They turn the room around and we see all sorts of weird spine curdling things, like literal spine curling things. But and he was like, you got to keep cool. You can't go around killing everyone. But even when they run into the Reapers and they start killing the Reapers, everyone else seemed pretty chill.
They start running
eventually, but their guns were being thrown out and knives were being drawn, and everyone was still like, this is normal.
Wait, there was a vampire who was snorting blood cocaine?
Yeah, I respect that.
Yeah, maybe that's like, it's like, I don't know, ground up bone of was mixed with blood. I don't know what that is, or maybe it's just cocaine.
It was just cocaine.
So this is the scene where we get introduced to the jaw opening up sideways, and we get the classic like zombie scene where a dude gets bit and you know he's gonna turn, but like he doesn't tell anyone, or he just covers it up. And
fuck that guy.
Yeah. So they
don't
make
be that
it
guy,
through the scene. Priest dies, and they go back, and Blade's like, all right, we got to attack him during the day because that's our only chance. So we're going out at daytime. One of my favorite lines, too, also a Ron Perlman, where he's like, she's like, yeah, you need to spray these pheromones on you. And he's like, we're going to put some suck puppy's nut juice all over ourselves and just travel around in the daytime. I was like, that's a good line.
That was a good line.
I have to give credit where credit's due. Is Guillermo del Toro and his effects and his practical effects are so good, and the way that he mixes digital with practical effects, the way they open up their jaws, I thought was pretty much as good as anything we come up with in modern day.
Yeah, I thought that looked very well done, especially for the time. And I love the creature design in this too. Like, I mean, that's obviously Del Toro's biggest strength in most of, if any, of his movies. But yeah, I really enjoyed the Reaper's design. They're a little like Nosferatu. Like, I like the older style vampire, very pale. They're not as sexy as these other vampires. And then like the fact that it has like this predator mouth, and the way, my favorite scene in this whole thing is when they like dissect it. That was my favorite scene in this whole movie.
Because it's all practical.
Yeah, it looks great.
Well, they have the tooth that the neurotoxin comes out of.
Yeah.
And then they find out that like the heart can only be stabbed from the side, which I love. In the end, like Blade paid attention in science class, so that's how he was able to survive.
Yeah.
The whole thing, I think, was probably better than most of the stuff that we see today as far as CGI and practical effects go. But a thing that was just cool is the guy who was bit, who's trying to cover it up, has like this mallet weapon, and he
Mhm.
hits the side of a Reaper's head, and it breaks his neck, and he pops it back. And the way that is like demonstrated, I thought that was so cool.
Yeah, I thought that effect was pulled off well. To go on the opposite end, some of the effects when they decide that they don't want to choreograph fights anymore and they just want to animate it,
I don't know what you're talking about, Matthew.
I don't think that looks too great. It
You're-
looks kind of like a Pixar movie, like just got slipped in for a minute.
You're talking about
The
where they're
characters
like,
feel very weightless.
yeah, weightless. They're all like jumping around, walking, like climbing on walls, and it just feels very
Yeah.
like uh, there's no gravity to the situation. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. It's and then it will like it's the fact that it's not quick either. Like it's long shots and they think they're cool. And they're I'm
Well,
sorry,
you know,
but
to
I'm
be
just
fair,
not a fan of.
no, I agree. Those did not age well. But if you look at the ones that do age well, they are mixed with practical effects. Like for the mouths, I think the only thing that's CGI for the mouths is the connection between the mouths and the actual human faces,
Mhm.
where they use um, digital imaging to like kind of hide the seams of the makeup. But everything else is practical. But the thing with the bodies jumping around everywhere is that it's all CGI. So and I bet it looked good in 2002. I bet it did. I bet people didn't have a problem with it. But now that we're looking back on it 20 years later, we're like, that was shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
guess.
So we get to this hunt, this daytime hunt, but it's downstairs in the sewer, so it still looks like it's nighttime. And
So
Perlman,
convenient.
yeah, right. Perlman and Chupa, they turn on Whistler, and Whistler immediately starts like releasing these pheromones, so you know what's going to happen there. Chupa is from Fast and the Furious 1. He's the guy that's
Oh.
also in love with Paul Walker's girl.
Hmm.
And then I was like, after this movie ended, I was like, what the fuck happened to Donnie Yen? Like, I don't remember what
Yeah.
happened to him at all. And I guess, so the big Lighthammer guy ate him.
Yep.
I did not know that's who he was eating. Like, I don't know if I just wasn't paying
No.
attention enough.
One of the coolest moments was given to a character that we know little to nothing about, was the guy's girl. I think the only girl on the team.
Verlaine.
Verlaine.
Nisa's another girl.
Well, not Nisa. Obviously Nisa, but like from the pack.
She's in the pack.
Nisa?
There's two of them.
But Nisa's like the leader of the... Look, I'm not gonna go with you. But the way she like gets him to go up to the sewer and open the thing, and she's like, I'm gonna die, but it's almost like an I can't live without you and you gotta go sort of thing.
Yeah.
That was great. I was like, man, what a thing to give a character that had no lines in this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, her death was kind of cool. The whole like just open the manhole cover, sacrifice yourself to kill one of the Reapers, and then you find out like a minute later that there's like 1,000 of those guys down there. It's
What's
insane.
funny too is that what establishes that is that the manhole covers, and it's daylight outside, and it's coming down, like you can see the sunlight coming down from the sewers. So when Ron Perlman is running through and you have those like bits of light coming down,
Yeah,
it hurts him. He's like trying to run away from the Reapers, but he's
I like
also
that.
dodging like the sunlight thing.
yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong, but like in the first Blade, when they are hit by sunlight, don't they like pop? Aren't they like the one guy that they take to the sunrise? Doesn't he like explode kind of deal? Now they
Yeah, but,
kind of
like,
just
it
seem like
takes-
they
it-
dissolve.
Yeah, I mean, it takes a little bit of time though, like for the sun to get them. So like the Ron Perlman burning his hand and stuff, I thought was funny. But
Mhm.
I think the practical effects are definitely like he wanted to put his own spin a little bit on it for this one. So
Yeah, probably.
Blade saves everybody, but then you have Ron Perlman kind of like basically twice trying to set him up to have him killed. And then when all the guys show up, the lawyer shows up with all the goons and they capture Blade. Like thinking back now, it's like, well, Ron Perlman just had to try to get you killed, but they want this whole thing seems to have been to get your blood so that they can walk during the day.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, I don't understand that. Like, they wanted him to kill all the Reapers besides the main one, or maybe they thought he killed all the... Why are all the Reapers so centrally located in this one area? Like, shouldn't they spread out? I guess because they're like, they describe them as crack addicts, so it's like they need their leader to show them where to go, but I guess they just assumed he killed everyone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do like the way they escalate the stakes in this movie from the first. Of like, the first one's like, we gotta hunt vampires. What's worse than a vampire? A crackhead vampire. And that's what we're doing here. It's fun. I
don't-
like just the concept
I don't
of a
even
crack
know
vampire.
what they face against fucking in Trinity. 'Cause
Triple H.
Is it Dracula? You gotta do Dracula in the third Blade.
It's legitimately Triple H. He's in the third one. He's a vampire.
What, are you kidding me? I thought you were
Yes.
joking.
But
No,
is he
he's
like? But is he like Dracula?
No, he's actually just a henchman. But yeah, Triple H is in the third one. Yeah, I don't remember. I kind of don't remember. I think the internal the internal fight of Blade is really what he's focusing on in that one. But then there's also another fight. He joins up with some other vampire hunters.
It is Dracula.
Good.
Jessica Biel and Ryan Reynolds.
Here we go.
Mm.
Yeah, that
Don't ruin it for
Blade
yourself,
Trinity
Alon.
just seems weird. I just
The, the only thing that
I'm
I'm
not
looking
even
at,
a huge fan of these first two, but Blade Trinity, that just sounds like a different beast that I'm not ready for. I'm not ready.
It goes in a different direction. It does not follow in the footsteps of Blade 2 at all. Like, you can watch. That's why, like, for the longest time I'd see Blade 1 and Blade 3, and it kind of like they kind of form together well with like completely skipping over Blade 2. Like, I don't. It's almost like it just
Kind
starts
of
from Blade 1.
unfortunate though.
Yeah, I mean, we're not done, but I like still enjoyed this movie, even though like there's some bad stuff in it, some stuff that just doesn't hold up well, or maybe it didn't work at the time. Who knows?
do you Matthew, when you were watching the first Blade, did you recognize the guy who played Deacon Frost, Stephen Dorff?
I did not.
So me neither. I kind of was like, oh, he's a nobody playing such a villain against iconic Wesley Snipes. But apparently, according to David, he's a big 90s guy, and I just wasn't aware of it.
Oh, what else is he in?
David?
I mean, this is the main thing for me. What's that? Deuces Wild was another big one. He's a leader of a gang. Frankie Muniz is in that gang, which is funny. Like, I think I talked about this on the Blade episode, but that movie's not very good. But there's this one scene. There's a fight scene where fucking Stephen Dorff comes in at the very end with brass knuckles and just beats the shit out of everyone. The only problem is it's shot at night, so you can't really see any of it.
Oh my gosh.
Otherwise, it would have been really badass. It's still kind of badass, but like I couldn't see it that well. Stephen Dorff, like people know who Stephen Dorff is. He was also in a Sofia Coppola movie somewhere with Elle Fanning. He's kind of now gotten to the point where he thinks he's like an auteur type actor, and like so he like shits on a lot of other Marvel movies and stuff like that. But he's doing a lot of direct to streaming, what you would have called direct to DVD type stuff back in the day. So
yeah. I just think bringing Stephen Dorff into the conversation, and then the guy who plays the main Reaper guy in this, which I also don't know him in anything. Looking who plays Count Dracula in Trinity is Dominic Purcell, who I only know from Prison Break.
Dominic Purcell, I forgot. Yeah, he's fucking awesome.
So, but they're not really big A-lister actors. And it's kind of weird having your main villain, your main hero being Wesley Snipes, and then your villains being these like B actors that maybe you heard of or maybe not. I just feel like if you're going to have like someone like Wesley Snipes, you should have someone big name to be the villain.
Yeah. Yeah, the villain Deacon Frost in the first movie was so much better than the main guy here. I don't even know the character's name or the actor's name in this one. But like, I don't know. Like in Deacon Frost, I'm not gonna like pretend he's like Darth Vader or anything, but like he had some memorable moments and stuff, and like I like the scene where he gets cut in half and the awful CGI blood pulls him back in. Like that's cool, and he has the fun moments where I love finding out that he holds up London Tipton from Sweet Life at the park. That's great. But yeah, just in this movie, the villains just aren't memorable. And I think that is also a symptom of the design where I do like the more Nosferatu vampire-ish vibe, but they all kind of look the same. So a lot of the time I was like, I don't know which villain this is right now. And then you meet the head of the vampires who looks the exact same as the Reapers.
Which is how you know, it's once again telegraphing that you know he's the main bad guy. Like he's the actual evil in this story. Let's get hold on. Let's get back to it, Alon. You've diverted us too long for a movie where nothing happens. We've been talking about it for entirely too long. So they bring Blade back and they're like, yeah, this is our grand plan. We're going to steal your blood. And they strip Blade of, this part is just fucking farcical to me. They strip Blade of all his weapons, except for the button he can press to blow up Ron Perlman's head. He's like, I'm going to fucking kill you. And then it doesn't work. And this is Scud's big reveal.
I love
and
this.
then he's like, oh, you know what? The button does actually work. And then he kills Scud. But like, what was his plan after that? It would have been more beneficial to you to kill Ron Perlman.
I was going to say that. That's what makes no sense.
Both of them as they're both holding it.
No, but you couldn't get the one line in. You couldn't get where he's like, I always suspected you. You couldn't get that in. And also, I love that scene because that means that he fake pressed the button to be like, oh shit, it doesn't work. And then he had his suspicions on Scud, but then it was really revealed when Scud thought he had the upper hand. And the fucking shit-eating grin, he's like, oh, I went behind your back and fixed it. And then he blew him up. It was beautiful to me. Best part of the movie.
The fact that earlier they say that the bomb will explode if anyone tampers with it. Why didn't it blow up when Ron Perlman pulled it off his head? It should have blown up then. Maybe that's the part he didn't fix. Nah, maybe he kept that part broke because he's like, it's just gonna be really cool. It's just gonna be really cool. And it's like, who's gonna be easier for you to kill, Blade? The vampire who's been training the last 2 years specifically to kill you, or just tech guy? Well, maybe you decide tech guy.
Apparently both, Matt, because after this scene, Ron Perlman dies almost immediately. Yeah, kind of lame death.
Well, I mean, a lot of stuff happens, right? Like Whistler has to escape, and then he kills the lawyer. He uses so many fucking bullets on that lawyer. It seemed unnecessary. Overkill.
I mean, he was a lawyer. So.
Guillermo del Toro has a thing against lawyers. I don't really. It's kind of a little much. I do love that when the lawyer is talking to Blade and he's like, Nomak wants revenge. He's like, well, good thing he doesn't know where we are. And he's like, he does now. And you just see him coming through and tearing through everybody, climbing the walls to get to his dad.
It's because of the ring, right?
Yeah. So he's like the Green Lantern.
No. Well, because then the Green Lantern joins Blade Trinity. Perfect. No, but there's a tracker in the ring.
He does. He actually does. That's awful.
I assume there's a tracker in the ring, but they don't tell us that.
They don't tell us that, but he looks at the ring and he goes, they do now. And then they go shoot back at the ring. And it's like, I guess that's what they're trying to say.
I don't.
I almost feel like it's one of those things that was never written. But then looking back on the script, they were like, oh shit, what does that even mean? And they're like, editor, can you cut it in a way where maybe we can think of it as it being the ring? And then he's like, I'll just cut back to the ring. And they're like, yeah, sounds good.
Yeah.
So Whistler,
I have a lot of issues with the ending. A lot of issues.
Yeah. Whistler has to get him to this blood pool, basically. And upon entering the blood pool, it instantaneously, like, completely revives him to where he then crushes, like, 20 dudes' heads. And then I love the Ron Perlman death. Is pretty sweet, where he hits the sword out of his hand and then just fucking cuts him in half. So cool.
That was cool.
I feel like that scene is somewhere in my like back of the mind childhood trauma where like I saw just that scene playing on cable.
I recognized it too, like Blade
Yeah.
coming out of the blood, and like the Ron Perlman talking. I recognized too. It's like it almost feels like a fucking scene that he's also done as Hellboy. Like the Ron
Mhm.
Perlman talking, the way he's shot, like the way the camera kind of looks up at him to make him look larger than life. I was like, it's definitely, I don't know, definitely like was something I thought I had seen before, which I have never seen this movie, but I may have seen like a clip from. Like definitely probably some lines from Blade are taken from this movie in like real clips and whatever.
For a guy who's named Blade, quite honestly, he doesn't use a blade that much in this movie.
I
He
was
needs-
really upset they didn't give him 2 blades in this. Like, here's a
And then
second
in
sword.
Trinity he has 3 blades.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
could be like Zoro from One Piece. Keep one in his mouth. That'd be great.
That's how math
Give me
works.
that.
Yeah. Mahershala Ali is gonna have 7.
7 blades.
So Nissa traps Nissa, whatever. She traps her father, and then the dude comes in and just immediately he's obviously gonna kill him, but I love the way the father tries to trick him, and then Nomak's just like, I believe you, but why are you trembling, father? And then kills him, doesn't turn him, just like puts the toxin in him to just kill him. It's good.
Mhm.
There before that, there's just 2 little things that I just want to talk about. One is Whistler throwing the glasses to Blade as Blade catches them, puts them on, which happened in the first one, and I'm just thinking like it it needs to happen in every Blade. Like not just like would I be disappointed if I don't see it in Trinity? Yes. But I'm even talking about like Mahershala Ali needs to grab a pair of sunglasses in midair, put them on, strike a pose, or it's not Blade. Okay?
Yep.
The second one is a great Whistler moment is him shooting all the rest of the embryos and like ending that cycle. I thought was a great like tying of loose ends sort of thing.
Mhm.
That's it, David. Go back to your big fight scene. I'm sorry.
I mean, the fight scene happens. It's not really like, it's really all I had is that it happens.
Well, he
Why
goes
does-
over and he kills Nisa.
Why does Nisa like let him do that? Why is she like, come on, do this. Come turn me.
I think she feels
made no sense
guilty.
to me.
I think she feels guilty of her father's doings, and she's like, "Wow, he's trying so hard to like do this bloodline thing. Like, I can't let it go on with me." That's how I took it.
It was just weird. To me, it felt like she was trying to buy Blade time, and then like right when her brother bites into her, she looks up and sees Blade and was like, "Oh shit! I thought you were gonna be longer." And like, I really didn't have to do this, and now I gotta die.
It seems to me that they probably planned on a sequel. They planned on the trilogy, and they're like, and we don't really have any plans for Nisa to be in the next one. We can't actually have him like marry a vampire. Sort of goes against who he is. So
I don't know. I mean,
He's
it sounds like
racist
she
too.
needs. It sounds like she needs a shot of whatever Whistler's on, and she'll be a-okay. I wonder if that'll ever come back in the third one. Like, oh, by the way, Whistler is still a fucking vampire.
I can't remember if he's in the third one. To be honest with you,
Oh my gosh! They retconned it again. Actually, he did kill himself in the first one. Blade 2 didn't happen. They're just gonna go back and forth the whole time. Did Ryan Johnson direct this one, this middle one? Then we're gonna get a Rise of Skywalker and Trinity. It's just actually all of that was wrong.
The thing is I think his daughter comes into the third one, and that's the plot point for that. But
Blades?
no, Whistler's.
Oh, Whistler's daughter.
Yeah.
Jessica Biel, I think.
Yeah, and yeah, man, I don't know about that, but I do like Nisa's death scene where he like carries her out into the sun. She wants to look at the sunrise, so they're on there, and she like evaporates in his arms, which is another horribly done CGI thing.
Yep.
But
I thought it looked pretty beautiful though.
I know we did an episode of this, so I don't know if you've seen this movie, Matthew, but David, do you remember 30 Days of Night?
Yeah.
You remember it's kind of a similar scene where he gets bit and he kind of dies as the sun rises?
Okay.
It reminded me of that a lot.
I don't remember that movie too well. There's parts of it I remember.
So he gets bit. He's turning. All the other vampires are
And
dead.
then
Spoiler.
I don't
Spoiler
need
alert.
you to. I don't need you to describe it to me. Why do you describing? You think you're going to describe it in a way that's going to be like, oh yes, that was beautiful.
But he doesn't want to turn into a killer, so he does the self-sacrificial thing. So
Beautiful. I don't even know who you're talking about, but you're going to ruin a movie for other people that haven't seen it. If you listen to this episode, you have to listen to all 200 previous ones and watch all
Facts.
corresponding
100%.
movies.
yeah, if you want to dive deep into the David and Alon lore,
The
see
canon.
where the canon, Matthew's origin story is in there somewhere.
Mhm.
It's
I
very
shot
cool.
myself in my first episode, and now I'm back.
So, and then it ends with a little, it's almost a stinger, but I don't think it happens. Maybe it does happen after. I don't remember. Anyway, basically he finds that guy Rush in a jerk off stand. And he's like, "You thought I forgot about you," which is like, it just would have been funny if he danced a little, But and that's how the movie ends.
If he was shirtless, if when he flicked the light on, he put the coin in. Wesley Snipes was just shirtless. He's like, "Thought I forgot about you."
with nipple tassels. There's a couple things I want to add. So, for the character of Nisa, Asia Argento, Cristiano Loken, and Rona Mitra were considered. Rona Mitra would have been good. Would have been nice.
I don't think I know any of those names you just said.
Fucking look them up. I don't care. Rona Mitra was. I mean, she looks a lot like Kate Beckinsale. That's the best I can do. But she's been in a lot of like this type of movies. What's that one movie? Doomsday. She was in Doomsday. Is kind of like one of her bigger things where she did.
Okay.
And then the last thing. This would have been amazing. Originally, there was supposed to be a vampire pimp in the first club scene that was going to be played by Michael Jackson. But unfortunately, he couldn't do it.
Great.
And then the
that
guy
would've
they
been so
had
good.
do it, like that scene eventually got cut. But if Michael Jackson's the vampire pimp, that scene's making it in the movie. So that's
That would have
unfortunate.
been perfect.
Yeah. That raises this by at least half a star. Because we're always just thinking back like, but fucking Michael Jackson vampire pimp. Like,
So what's everyone's final thought? Matthew, what's your final thought of this film?
I think going back and think about like Hellboy as compared to this, and I said in that movie that I really enjoyed the action, but I really enjoyed what Del Toro can do to the monster and humanizing the monster.
Mm-hmm.
I kept waiting for a moment like that in Blade. And just the first movie's a lot of action and one-liners, and I got to the sequel, and I was like, all right, Del Toro's in the helm now. We're going to really find out who this Blade guy is. He's going to have wants, desires, like dislikes. No, we don't get any of that. We didn't I don't need him saving cats out of trees or stalking his ex or whatever, but something like we're 2 movies in. I don't know anything about this Blade guy except he just likes to pump his fist and kill vampires. So I was really disappointed in this movie.
I see where you're coming from. I think we get a little bit of that in the first one. We get more of that in the first one than the second one, definitely.
Which is shocking.
We get a bit of that with his mom, his interaction with his mom. And then I think in the second one, the only time we get that is in the beginning with Whistler.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we get that in the first one with Whistler's death. But now that scene kind of gets retroactively destroyed. So, yeah, I don't know. I was just... And then everyone tells me, like, oh, the Blade... first 2 Blade movies are great. Like, they're in that kind of dawn of the superhero renaissance. And I don't like this movie. I'm really sad to say it, but I love a lot of the action sequence, the practical effects. I like the creature design, but just when it comes to like some of the CGI is bad, the writing I don't think is there, the characters are all super half-baked. Yeah. But Ron Perlman's like fantastic. I could watch him all day. So like for every 1 step forward, I feel like there's 2 steps back for this one for me. So it's a little lower on my end.
Yeah, I love the first one, and I like the third one is kind of it's like it's not so bad it's good, but it's like it's bad but still enjoyable to me. I haven't seen it in forever. This one, like the fighting isn't good enough for how bad the script is.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't make up for it for me. But it's still like I had low expectations, so it was still fine to me. Like I enjoyed it more than I thought I would, I guess. Like the parts I didn't think I was gonna like were like the creatures and stuff, but then when you know it's a Del Toro movie and you come into it, you're like, all right, well that shit was good. But like I don't know. Overall, I've seen a lot worse movies. That's my final take.
I definitely like the first one better, and I'm also disappointed in that because I really wanted to like the second one, and not because usually sequels have a notorious being better than the original. They don't, except for a few. But I was hoping that there were some story mistakes or some just offbeats that the first one had that I was hoping the second one would correct. And it doesn't. And somehow it doubles down on the faults of the first one, and doesn't do enough doubling down on the good of the first one to like equalize it out to be at least as good as the first one. And then I hear like a lot of people really like this movie, so I apologize to them for having bad taste. But the the disappointment is disappointing for me. So I think that's not that's
That
one
was
of our
That was
yeah
well
that,
said.
thank you. I think this is one of the first movies where we all come out of it where we're not that huge fans of.
I don't know. I'm not gonna think back.
You never do. Well, thanks for listening to another episode of I Finally Watched. I'm Milan.
I'm Matthew.
And this is David, and we all three finally watched Blade 2.